So welcome this evening. This is the fifth session of the Zach Bates Eco Adventure Series. This is your Master of Ceremony, as I like to call myself, W. Bradford Swift. And I am here tonight with our audiobook narrator, who's going to be doing most of the work as I kind of work in the background most of the time, Ben Fife, who is available if you're interested in finding out more about him at bennyfifeaudio.com. We would encourage you, whether you are a author who would like to find out more about his narration services, or you might be a reader who would like to find out some really great books that are available in audiobook, as you will see tonight with his many talents as well. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and doing a very quick video. And I always have to find the particular right one here. So here we go.
Catch the magic. Edge of your seat suspense. A call to arms, to wings, and fins. An eloquent environmental series, perfect for kids, young adults, and animal lovers of all ages. Soar along with Readup, the magic cat, who will stop at nothing to fulfill her mission, along with Samson, the flying dog. Inspiring kids to become lifelong readers by introducing them to the joys of reading for pleasure. Join the Zach Bates Eco Adventure Readup each month via Zoom. Sign up at wbradfordswift.com/readup.
Okay, very good. We welcome another person or two onto the call tonight. Welcome, Mary Pat. Glad to have you.
If you work in a team, you should be using Monday.com. It's a platform to manage any team and any workflow. Marketing, sales pipelines, construction, creative productions, you name it.
There we go. Get rid of that. Okay. Again, welcome this evening for everybody.
Rita, Janelle, Eleanor, Ben, and a telephone. Hello, and Brad. Hello.
Welcome. Welcome. So this is the fifth Zach Bates Eco Adventure Read Up Hour itself. My team and I are thrilled to have you join us as we read the first book, Dominion Over All, of the Zach Bates Eco Adventure series. I had the pleasure of announcing this Monday of this past week that I had completed the fourth book, Junkyard Dogs, the rough draft, which is a big accomplishment, and that means it's not complete yet because there's a lot of editing to do and all the other things we have to do to get it ready. But hopefully by February, we will have that out and available as well. Tonight, I'll be recapping a little bit of the story that we've covered up to this point, and then Ben will be reading the majority of the new content. And during that time, we ask that you either remain on mute or keep yourself in a very quiet environment. And periodically, as we've done in the past, we'll pause to chat about the story, maybe ask you a few questions, get your comments. And there will also be time at the end of the call for questions and answers about either the story or what it's like to be an author or an audiobook narrator, anything that you want to ask us at that time. So we've covered a lot of ground in these past few weeks, actually past months, because we've been doing these each month. As you may recall, if you've been on previous ones, or if not, to catch you up, Zach's misadventures began when his four-legged buddy, Angus, his pet Karen Terrier, was hit by a car and needed to be taken to the local vet, Dr. George, where he meets Readup, the last living magic cat, and his soon-to-be best friend, Allie George, which is Dr. George's daughter. Now, it turns out that Rackett had a bit of a hand in causing the accident as a way to encourage, or you could say blackmail, Zach into helping her with a very important mission in exchange for saving Angus's life. The catch was that she couldn't tell Zach what the mission was until he committed to doing it, which he finally does, and she does save Angus's life. Now, it turns out the mission, not a small one, is for Zach to go before the International Environmental Summit against global warming. All he has to do is persuade the world leaders to quit polluting the earth. But first, Zach, Rackett, and Rackett's flying companion, Samson, a magical flying dog, must take a trip to the spiritual frontier to meet with the Council of Animals, where Zach must get their alignment for the mission as well. Now, while Zach has no real plan, and he's now regretting ever agreeing to this mission, he does persuade the council to go along with whatever Zach, Rackett, and Samson can come up with. After leaving the spiritual frontier, Rackett decides she needs to take Zach on a tour of some of the worst examples of humankind's assault on the planet and its devastating effects on the animals of the world. To visit all these distant locations, they must resort to warping, which is a magical way to move around the earth quickly. Unfortunately for Zach, it turns out warping has its own set of dangers, as we learned at the very end of our last section. I'm going to read just a very short part where we covered last time, and then I'm going to turn it over to the real voice, Ben himself. So they exited the warp less than 50 feet above a dense forest of trees. They skimmed along the tops of the trees like a dive bomber out of control. Samson fought with all of his strength to stay above the trees, but with each passing second, it became clear they were going to dive into the forest. Zach found himself pulling on the thick nap of Samson's neck as though he had control of a non-responsive stick in an airplane. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben.
Zach held his breath, certain they were about to die, and a little disappointed that his life hadn't flashed before his eyes. Just another myth that's not true, he thought, as he continued to cling to the nape of Samson's neck. Suddenly, the trees below disappeared. They were flying, still out of control, over a gully-etched field. As they came closer to the ground, Samson managed to slow his speed sufficiently to regain some control. They slid along the hard-baked mud for 100 feet before finally coming to a stop. Samson collapsed on his side, sending Rackett and Zach tumbling onto the sun-baked surface. All three lay there for several minutes, catching their breaths. Finally, Rackett stood up and started cleaning herself. "Let's see if we can find a stream to wash off in," she said. Her companions were as dirty as she. Zach stared at Rackett. "I thought we were all going to die, and now all you can do is say, 'Let's find a stream to wash off'?" "Yes, that's right. You see, Zach, almost dying is very different from actually dying. Yes, that was a close call, but we're fine, except that we're dirty. So I suggest we take care of that and move on with our mission." Zach continued to stare at her for several more seconds, but as Rackett and Samson started walking away, leaving him behind, he finally stood up, brushed himself off, and looked around. They had landed in the center of a large clearing. In the distance, he could hear a deep rumble that seemed to come from beyond the thick wall of the rainforest. At first, he thought the sound was thunder, like he often heard on hot summer days, but the sound was constant. "What's that noise?" He ran to catch up with Samson and Rakit, who had headed for the line of trees. Earth movers, Rakit answered. They're what we came to see. You had some of the thickest, most lush vegetation found on the planet. What happened? Zack asked. Was there a fire? It started with a fire, one set by humans. This isn't the product of a natural disaster. It's worse. It's a man-made disaster. Some humans decided they had need for the wood. They bought the land for next to nothing, with little or no concern for what would happen to the land once the trees were removed. After they took the wood they could use, they cut down the rest of the forest and burned it. Humans call it progress. Anyone with just a little sense can see it for what it is, suicide. The three walked along in silence. As they neared the forest, Zack asked, I know what is being done is wrong, but why is it suicide? Can't we just plant more trees? Rakit stopped and looked at Zack, shaking her head slowly. You don't understand. You can't just ravage a forest which is hundreds of years old, come back and plant little saplings and expect everything to be all right. Oh, eventually the forest will return. But unfortunately, the rate at which the rainforests are being destroyed is much greater than any reforestation project. Despite whatever you might hear from the PR department of Consolidated Enterprises. Rakit turned and looked at the vast wasteland. Less than 50% of our original forests remain. Most of the destruction has taken place in the last 30 or 40 years. At the present rate, forests will be extinct before the year 2100. The planet will be in dire straits before then, she continued. One of the biggest factors is that we're losing the ability to convert carbon dioxide back to oxygen and water. The carbon dioxide buildup on the planet is one of the chief contributors to the global warming effect that so many of your world leaders and politicians are still arguing about whether it's real or not. Rakit turned back to Zack. He wasn't sure, but he thought he could see tears in her eyes. You sure seem to know a lot of facts and figures for being a cat. Rakit glared at him. First off, I'm not just a cat. I'm a magic cat. And secondly, of course I've done my homework. I couldn't expect you to know all this. After all, you're only human. Ouch. I guess I deserved that one. Sorry if I offended you. Apology accepted. Rakit walked on for several paces before continuing. You see, our planet is a sensitive ecosystem, much more sensitive than humans realize. It started out in perfect balance. Everything was placed here for a purpose. I suppose even humans were, but somewhere, something went wrong. Samson nodded. Chaos. That's what went wrong. What? Who? Zack asked. Chaos is, well, he's a spiritual being, or presence, I guess you could say. I suppose that's the easiest way to describe him. He rules the world of disorder and entropy, Rakit said, then seeing a puzzled look on Zack's face, tried again. Let's see. In the universe, there are two domains, two worlds, but not worlds like the Earth is a world. Kind of like the spiritual frontier is a world. Actually, the spiritual frontier is part of the world of order. Understand? Zack nodded his head slowly, unsure whether he understood, but not wanting to make Rakit angry. Okay, there are two domains, order and disorder. Chaos rules in the latter. Whenever he shows up, you can count on there being a disruption in the normal way. It appears he has been spending a lot of his time on Earth. Too much time. You see, the natural order of things normally keeps chaos in balance, allows a little disorder in the universe for contrast, but not so much as to cause irreversible damage. Unfortunately, irreversible damage is exactly what is happening on Earth. Zack nodded. He wasn't sure he understood all of what Rakit was saying, but enough to get the general idea. In short, chaos is our enemy, but it's next to impossible to oppose him directly, since he's a spiritual being and very slippery. Usually the best we can do is counterattack by reversing the disorder he creates. Zack nodded again, a confused look still on his face. Take your room, for example, Rakit said with uncommon patience. Have you ever noticed how it seems to get messed up without you doing much about it? Yeah, that's true, Zack answered, his face brightening. Sometimes it seems like it messes itself up. That's chaos at work, Rakit replied. We'll walk towards the sound of the earth movers and see if we can get a glimpse of the destruction firsthand, she said, suddenly changing the subject. Soon they were at the edge of the forest, a clear demarcation between Mother Nature and man. Off in the distance, they could see a group of men wearing hard hats, gathering around some of the largest earth-moving equipment Zack had ever seen. Stenciled on the side of each one were the large black letters, CE. This is a consolidated enterprise job, isn't it? Yes, that's right, Rakit replied. That's the company my dad works for. Yes, I know. You know? Is that why you brought me here? To rub it in my face that my dad works for one of the worst destroyers of the planet? As he yelled at Rakit, a couple of the men looked up. Shh! Rakit tried to push him back into the forest's undergrowth, but it was too late. Zack recognized one of the men. Oh my God, that's my dad. He suddenly felt himself yanked by the back of his belt by Samson. Before he could stop him, Samson had pulled him out of the clearing. We've got to get out of here. Rakit spoke sternly, but without anger. They ran through the lush rainforest for several minutes until they were sure no one was chasing them. Finally, Rakit stopped. I'm sorry, Zack. I knew your dad works for CE, and yes, I knew he was involved in some way with this project, but honestly, I had no idea he would be here. If I had, we would have visited another site. Zack didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say. He knew CE was far from the cleanest company around, but he had no idea that his dad was so intimately involved in such a destructive project. He felt embarrassed and angry all at the same time. Shall we go? Rakit asked. No, Zack snapped with more force than he'd intended. No, I want to see exactly what is happening here. They continued strolling through the dense forest towards the rumbling sound. As they neared the source of the sound, Zack could feel the ground beneath his feet vibrate. The rumbling sound grew more distinct. It sounded like the huge trees of the forest were crumbling before some massive weight, the trees moaning in despair. It's horrible, Zack covered his ears, like the forest is crying out in pain. Rakit turned to Zack to explain, but before she could say a word, Samson shouted, Watch out! Zack and Rakit turned and looked. As they watched, the large tree Samson had been pointing at wavered for a moment, then came crashing down. In the next second, a smaller tree next to it joined its larger partner, then the next and next. The threesome watched in dumbstruck silence as the swath of falling trees came closer and closer. There, Samson said, pointing off to the left. And there. He pointed in the other direction. Two huge yellow caterpillar tractors, about 50 feet apart, rumbled towards them. Between the tractors, the forest churned. They're dragging down the forest, Rakit shouted as she pointed to a massive chain that ran between the two mammoth tractors. Quick, we've got to get out of their path. The three of them made a wild dash with Samson, leading the way as they wound through the thick underbrush. Behind them, the sound of crashing trees grew louder, and the earth shook beneath them. We're not going to make it, Zack thought as he glanced over his shoulder. He decided to try a different tactic. He stopped running. Instead, he turned and began shouting and jumping into the air, waving his arms and legs. Whoa! Here we are! Can't you see us? He shouted at the top of his lungs. Still, the tractor continued to cut its devastating path through the forest. Stop that! He heard Rakit from behind him. They don't like trespassers. They'd just as soon shoot you as run you down. Uh-oh, Zack thought. One of the men on the closer tractor pointed in his direction. He turned and started running harder as the man jumped off the tractor and ran after him. Behind the tractors, at a respectable distance, came a line of bushmen, cutting at the fallen debris of the forest with machetes. The man from the truck turned and shouted something to the men, but Zack was too far away to understand. The tractor slowed to a stop as several of the bushmen followed their leader on the chase. Well, I got the tractor to stop, Zach thought, but he knew they were only in deeper trouble now. The men could run much faster than the tractors had been moving. They were rapidly closing the distance between them. Samson and Rakit had continued to run and were well ahead. Zach couldn't tell in which direction they had gone. There didn't seem to be any path to follow. The undergrowth of the forest was impenetrable. The vines clung to Zach's shoes, tripping him with every step. Close behind, he could hear the whacking of the bushmen's machetes as they cleared their way to him. What would they do if they caught him? Zach wondered. He glanced behind, to his eyes off of where he was going. He lost his footing and fell. When he tried to get up, the vines wrapped themselves around his body, as though to hold him until the men could reach him. "Help! Rakit, Samson!" Zach screamed. He finally managed to stand up, only to shouting in some foreign tongue that sounded similar to the Spanish he occasionally heard Kalita speak. They were clearly not happy to find a small boy in their woods. Zach tried crawling through the undergrowth, looking for somewhere to hide. He was able to make some headway in that fashion, but still the sounds of the approaching men grew louder. He thought he caught a glimpse of a black shiny coat off in the distance, but it disappeared before he could be sure. He tried yelling for help, this time for Rakit or Samson, but couldn't find enough breath to take more than a pleading whine. As he lost his balance again and fell on his face, he turned in time to see a group of three native men only a few feet away, their wide grins mocking him. What would they do to him? Would they kill him right there in the woods, or take him back to their village and burn him at the stake? Both choices were terrifying. One of the men cleared the final vines between them with a vicious slice of his machete. The man reached down with his other hand as Zach cowered away. Zach was about to close his eyes and try one final scream when he saw the glint of light flash off a set of gleaming teeth as Samson leaped through the bush and in onto the closest man, sending him crashing into the two other men a few feet behind. The three men screamed. From a few feet away, Zach heard Rakit's reassuring voice. "This way! Come this way!" Zach crawled in the direction of her voice. "Where are you? Can't see you." "Keep coming. You're almost here," Rakit replied, and suddenly Zach saw her gleaming eyes through the leaves. "I've got to get you out of here." Zach noticed she was panting and her eyes were widely dilated. Had she been at the catnip again? "What do you mean?" Zach asked. He could hear the men behind him shouting hysterically, mingled with Samson's deep snarls. "How about you and Samson?" No time, Rakit replied. "We'll be in touch." "What?" But before Zach could say any more, he suddenly felt lightheaded, and leaves began to flutter and swirl around him, as though he sat in the middle of a small whirlwind. More and more leaves joined in, and soon his entire view was obscured. Then he felt his own body spinning with the leaves, although slower. "What's going on here?" he wondered. "Am I warping? Holy cow, I don't know how to warp." He tumbled head over heels through space. He felt the slap of damp leaves against his face, but when he tried to open his eyes, he became sick and had to close them again. His head felt so light, he thought he would black out. Then he did.
Very good. I'm going to take just a very brief pause here so that Ben can get a drink of water if he needs to. And I wanted to share one thing. So I'm going to share my screen again because this seems to be just a perfect time to share this, given what just happened. One of the things I wanted to mention is coming in 2021 is a Zach Bates Eco Adventure coloring book. We actually have the artist who is creating the pages on our call tonight, Eleanor. She is busy creating these, and I wanted to share this most recent one, which you can see on the screen there. It's Zach, Samson, and Rakit running for their life, and you'll see in the background this huge tractor bearing down on them. So this is one of the pages that's now available. If you go to wbradfordswift.com/readup. And it will be one of the pages that'll be in the coloring book that will be available through Amazon and other outlets before the end of the year for sure. And sometime I would say in the first quarter, maybe in the first half of this year itself. I just wanted to share this and commend and thank Eleanor, Eleanor and her little companion there are two of the daughters of Ben Fife. So it's a family matter here, isn't it? So, okay, let me see if I can get out of here. Okay, and also one of the questions I often like to ask, I'm going to ask it here for those who are on the call and those who will be listening in, is what would be the mission that you, if you were to go on a mission with the Zach Bates Eco Adventure team to help some parts of the animal world, what mission would you like to go on? And I would like you to think about that, and that towards the end, if we have time, we can discuss that, maybe have some ideas. The book that I mentioned that I finished in rough draft, the Junkyard Dog, part of that idea actually came from one of our early read-ups by one of the children who was on the call, made a suggestion, and it sparked an idea in my own head that I'd been working on for a while, and the two just kind of came together, and it seemed to be the perfect next book itself. So I always would love to get your feedback either tonight and or other times by email itself. So with all that being said, Ben, if you are ready, we will resume with a brief summary before we go too far. So basically, Zach awakens to find himself back at home, quite disoriented and wondering if it had all been a dream. He goes downstairs to have breakfast with his with his father and stepmother, and begins to realize that his dad, that we've just learned works for Consolidated Enterprises, is obviously involved with much of the pollution that's happening in the world itself. And so we'll pick it up right there with Ben.
His mind flashed to an image of a lush rainforest being destroyed before his eyes. The image lasted for only an instant, but the details were so clear, he felt as though he could smell the moist earth. Zach shook his head and was instantly back in the kitchen. His father stood at the phone staring at him, a look of concern on his face. Had something gone wrong with the payoff? As his father sat down, he continued to study Zach. "Are you feeling okay, son?" he whispered as he sipped his cup of coffee. "Yeah, Dad, I'm fine. It's just..." Zach couldn't remember ever opposing his father. He couldn't remember even having a different opinion. Oh, small stuff like what time he should have to go to bed. Well, of course, there was the matter of his dad bringing home a bride without telling anyone, but nothing like this. Nothing so cosmic in scope. But suddenly, it was clear they were on different sides of the fence on this issue. "What is it, son?" "Well, it's just not fair what you're doing," Zach blurted out. "Paying off people to keep them from voting something that could save our world." Wendell's coffee cup stopped a few inches from his mouth. He carefully put the cup back on the saucer. A familiar look formed on his face. Oh no, here it comes. Lecture time. "How old are you, son?" "Almost 14, Zach answered. Well, his birthday was only 6 or 7 months off. "Really?" Wendell said, obviously surprised by his answer. "You're growing so fast. Still, you've got a lot to learn about what makes the world go around. I know I might seem like what I'm doing is wrong, but I'm really looking after everyone's best interest. If Consolidated Enterprises were to suffer the losses these new environmental regulations would bring about, I could be out of a job. I don't need to remind you where the money comes from for those pancakes. Look around you. Everything we have comes from Consolidated." Wendell paused for a moment and took a sip of his coffee and then tried again. "Listen, son, It's great you've taken an interest in this environmental thing. Really, it is. But there's a lot to learn about it. It's not just a matter of saying, let's stop polluting the environment. Yeah, but it's a start, Zach replied. His dad reached over and patted his shoulder. Sure, it's a start, but it needs to be done responsibly, slowly, so it doesn't jeopardize everything we've built so far. That's all I'm saying. This UN summit is simply asking us to do what we all know we've got to do, but they're expecting us to ignore everything else. It just can't be done so fast. Zach stared down at his half-empty plate. For some reason, he wasn't hungry anymore. Why does this mean so much to me? He wondered. As he stared at the pool of syrup, there suddenly appeared the face of a black dog with a black cat riding on its back. Just as quickly, the image was gone again. Maybe his father was right. Not about the environmental thing. Zach felt certain his father was wrong about that. We didn't need to move slowly on making changes. Everyone had been dragging their feet too long already. But maybe his dad was right that something was off with him. Maybe he should stay home from school. He looked up at his father and smiled weakly. Maybe you're right, Dad, but it doesn't seem like we have much time left. If we keep putting it off... Wendell dropped his coffee cup hard onto the saucer. Zach, you don't understand what I'm saying. When you're older, you'll realize there's only so much one person can do. I know, Zach thought. I'm afraid I may have already learned that lesson. In the meantime, son, trust me when I say I know what we're doing here. His father stood up and mussed his hair one last time. Oh, by the way, you're not to mention this to anyone. Do you understand? I'm trusting you to keep this conversation confidential. Is that clear? Zach nodded. It left an empty feeling in the pit of his stomach, despite the pancakes he'd just eaten. After Wendell left, Zach continued to sit at the table, playing with the remaining food until Kalita walked over. What's the long face about? Aren't you excited about picking Angus up after school? What? Angus? Where was Angus? Of course, he was at the vet's. He'd been hit, and then what? Zach looked up from his plate and smiled. Sure, maybe I could stay. Don't even try it, Kalita said with a laugh. You've missed enough school. I'll pick you up at the regular spot, and we'll go straight to the hospital. On the way over, you can tell me how your visit with Luke went. Visit with Luke? What was she talking about? He wasn't sure what he'd been doing for the past few days, but he was sure it hadn't been with Luke. He picked his plate up and started to take it to the sink. Halfway there, he remembered where he'd been. The dog and cat. He'd been with them. They were special animals. Very special. But had they been real, or had he only dreamed of them? Daydreaming again? Kalita asked as she took the dish from him. Better go upstairs and comb your hair. Your father has it looking like a bird was making a nest in it. Go on, Scoot. Zach ran to do as he was told, but he couldn't shake the memory of the dog and cat. Somehow there was a connection between them and his new concern about the environment. Dream or not, he had to figure out what the connection was.
Very good. Thank you, Ben. And I point out a couple quick things. One is, as you may be picking up, and given that we are virtual on Zoom, we're getting a little glitch every now and then. I can promise you that it's not in Ben's voice, but in the connection that we have tonight. So we'll just account for that. Also, in case we did not mention or you have missed that, Luke, the person that he was supposed to have visited, which he obviously did not, is his older brother who's away at college. So just to kind of include that. Now, we're going to skip ahead again in the book and just know that Wendell, Zach's dad, is starting to wonder if he'd made a mistake and had maybe sold out on some of his values when he went to work at Consolidated Enterprises. But he feels like it's too late to do anything about it now. And meanwhile, after a very stressful day at school, Zach finally escapes when Kalita, his stepmom, picks him up so that they can go retrieve Angus from the hospital. And that's where we'll pick it up. Go for it there, Ben.
Dr. George's receptionist greeted them with a big smile from behind the reception desk. It's the big day, isn't it, Zach? I'll say, is Angus ready? Just about. I think he's getting a final brushing. We wanted to be sure he looked his best for you. Dr. George will want to speak with both of you. As she spoke, Allie George walked down the hall from the treatment room, drying her hands with a towel. Hello, Zach. Hello, Mrs. Bates. If you like, I'll take you back to Angus. I know he'll be excited to see you. You go ahead, Zach. I'll stay here and take care of the bill. As Zach and Allie walked to the back of the hospital, to the grooming area, he felt his mouth going dry and his underarms growing moist. Come on, guy, give it a break, he thought. This is Allie. You managed to talk to her the other day, and this time there's no chance Rat will find out. He took a couple deep breaths to calm himself. As they passed by the intensive care ward, Zach stopped and looked at the glass-fronted cage where Angus had been for the first few days. Suddenly, the uncomfortable feeling that he was forgetting something returned. Something was missing, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Allie returned to his side and put a hand on his shoulder. It's okay, Zach. Angus will never need to be in that cage again. Zach nodded, but at the same time, he knew something was the problem. Something was missing. Something or someone. Tip! Where's Tip? Zach blurted out. Who? Allie asked, momentarily confused by the sudden outburst. Oh, Tip. You mean the old black cat that was hanging around here for a few days? She must have found lodging elsewhere. We haven't seen her since the weekend. So there had been a black cat after all, Zach thought. Sure, a stray black cat named Tip. So what? It doesn't mean there had accessed the real world with a dream, Zach told himself. Snap out of it that it wasn't a dream. He'd been on a great adventure, and it was far from over. Allie opened the door to the grooming room and stepped aside. A familiar brought tears to Zach's eyes. Angus stood on the rubber surface of the grooming table, most of his weight on his left side, his whole body wiggle. Zach ran to him and lifted Angus in his arms, while the dog washed Zach's face with a dozen dog kisses. Zach laughed. Angus licked them clean.
Very good. Again, getting a little bit of technical difficulties. Nothing we can do about that. We appreciate your patience on that. We're working well towards the end of our section tonight. I am going to take us off of a particular view here and just open it up for, let's see, let me see if I can find how to get over to gallery view so I can see everybody itself. And I'm going to ask y'all to unmute, or anybody who cared to unmute. We're in our last phase of the question itself, of the reading itself. Anything that anybody would like to ask, any part of the book that's not clear, any part that maybe because of the technical glitches you want to ask about, or any comments you'd like to make before we go into the last segment itself. Give you an opportunity to share. Yes, Teresa first.
Ray Kit totally reminds me of my own cat. He blackmails me all the time.
Well, I'll be honest. We have lost the kitty that Ray Kit's based on. Her name was Mama Kitty. She was with us for many years, and she was kind of that sassy old woman type thing, even when she was a young kitty itself. So, she's been memorialized. That's the word I'm trying to say. Memorialized, in Ray Kit itself. So thanks for mentioning that, Teresa. I appreciate that.
Sounds like she was a great cat.
She was a wonderful cat, and all white, not all black. But anyway, so we had to kind of cover her, so so nobody would, we had to protect the innocent. Yes.
This is Oscar.
Yes. Hey, Oscar.
We have a few pictures of him when he was very little.
It was a beautiful.
And the
He looks like he's
picture
almost,
is, I think there's
almost as
also a
big as you are.
video with me like having like a baby doll blanket and having him as a kitten wrapped in it. And I was carrying him. And then I put him on the couch.
Maybe you can get your dad to send us some pictures. We really need to do that. We talked about it early on and we haven't done it yet. Maybe for one of our last sessions, maybe even for our last 2 sessions, we can do a share pictures of your own pets. Since this is really all about animals, we want people to know and appreciate all the animals of the world. Maybe we'll do that. So I'm going to ask Mary Pat, who's part of our outreach team, to make note of that so that we can address that in one of our upcoming meetings itself. Anybody else have anything they'd want to share before we go into the final read for the night? And then there's a few things that we'll have, a few announcements at the end. And again, we'll have another time for, questions and answers. Okay. Ben, I think it's up to you to take us home.
Okay. Wendell dropped the notes on the table and looked around at the other 6 executives that included his new boss, Richard Turner. As I was saying, the project, well, it's going fine. It's on schedule and within budget. It's just, he paused, not sure how to say what was on his mind. Well, is that it, Wendell? Richard asked. We didn't send you all the way down there to simply come back here with a 1-sentence summary. Well, it's just that I'm wondering if it's really sound project. I mean, have we really stopped to consider the effect that it and other similar projects will have over the long haul? The sweat beaded on his face again, this time not from physical exertion. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone looked around the room at everyone else, puzzled looks on their faces. Then all eyes returned to the person who had just dropped such a bomb in the room. What the hell are you talking about? Richard finally asked, and all the other heads nodded in unison. I'm just responsibilities for our projects. But by beginning to look at the global effects they have on our world and the environment. I mean, after all, we're one of the largest conglomerates in the world. If we took a greater interest in global warming and the environmental impact we're having, others would follow. We could be global leaders. We are global leaders, you idiot. Richard shouted across the table at him. I sent you down there on a simple assignment to assess the progress on a multi-million I got kicked off for a minute.
There we go. You're back.
I'll back up a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, after all, we're one of the largest conglomerates in the world. If we took a greater interest in global warming and the environmental impact we're having, others would follow. We could be global leaders. We are global leaders, you idiot. Richard shouted across the table.
We do appear to be having some technological difficulties here. Perhaps Ben will be back. If not, we will leave you guys hanging until next time. No, maybe we can work out some way to get that last part done and send it out to you. Let's see. Here he comes.
Okay, I switched to a different internet connection. Let's try this again.
Okay.
Okay. We are global leaders, you idiot. Richard shouted across the table at him. We're global leaders at making a profit for our stockholders. I sent you down there on a simple assignment to assess the progress on a multi-million-dollar some wildlife will be affected. That's the cost of doing business. That it's because we're global leaders at making a profit that we're able to pay you a six-figure income. Not to mention 4 weeks of vacation, a pension plan, and profit sharing that no other company can touch. Wendell could feel his face becoming flush again, this time from anger and embarrassment. If you're planning on going green on me, Bates, I'd suggest you start by pawning that Rolex on your arm, hawking your Lexus parked in the executive parking lot, and donating the proceeds to Greenpeace. When you're ready to do that, I'll listen to your tirades. Until then, how about just sticking to the facts and figures that we're paying you so well to compile? There was a deathly silence around the table as everyone held their breath, wondering what would happen next. Finally, Richard broke the silence. Okay, who's next? With just a brief, pregnant pause, Hugh Silvers coughed before speaking. I can go next. Angus barked as he ran from the man with the gleaming machete. Faster, Angus, faster, Zack screamed. Only a few yards.
Ben, try going off camera and see if it makes a difference.
I think he's currently frozen. I'm not sure he can hear us yet. So when he comes back, we'll suggest that. Thank you, Mary Pat.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
I've had issues and I could go off camera and they could hear me fine.
Well, as one recourse, I can read it. I just can't read it, even though I wrote it nearly as well as he can read it. So we'll see if he comes back. I think it looks like he's trying to come back now. I'm seeing somebody over here on the side. There we go.
I'm sorry. Our connection is garbage today.
Yeah.
The wind is blowing out there.
Mary Pat suggested that you try
Going off
stopping your video and just keeping your audio on and see if that helps.
I could try that. We'll go for that.
Okay.
Angus barked. Angus barked again at his sleeping master, then reached over and licked Zack's outstretched hand. No, don't, no. Zack tossed and turned and almost fell out of bed. His eyes flew open, and he found himself staring down at Angus, a split second from falling. He caught himself at the last second and pulled away from the edge. Another nightmare, the fourth one he'd had in the past couple of weeks. The only thing different about this one was that he couldn't remember the black cat or dog being in it. This was the first time Angus had appeared instead. Holy smoke, Zack said. He threw his legs over the edge of his bed. What is going on, Angus? What are we doing being chased by mad natives carrying yard-long machetes? Angus cocked his head to one side and replied, "Ruff!" Then limped over to the edge of the bed and whined to be helped down. Zack lifted him gently to the floor. Angus went to the bedroom door and scratched to be let out. I'll let you out in a second. Let me go first. Zack strolled to the bathroom. You're really doing great with your leg. It's hard to believe it's only been 3 weeks since you've come home. You're hardly limping at all. Angus sat down outside the bathroom door and waited patiently for his master. 3 weeks, Zack thought. Time was really flying, which was surprising considering he was just in the first month of school, which normally seemed to pass so slowly. It was almost September already, and then they'd be into October. October. Do. Zach went over to the sink and started brushing his teeth. In the past 3 weeks, Zach had decided that there really had been a cat and a flying dog. There just had to have been. The memory too clear to be his imagination. But if that was true, where were they? Surely they should have shown up by now. Unless they were captured or killed by the bushmen in the rainforest, in which case they might not be able to come back. 5 days away. What to do? Zach rinsed the toothpaste out of his mouth and stared at himself in the mirror. He'd promised to do whatever was necessary to persuade the countries of the world to stop the pollution. He'd promised it not only to Ray Kit and Samson, but to the entire assembly and council of animals. But most importantly of all, he'd promised it to himself. But I can't do it by myself. The deal was that Ray Kit and Samson would go with me. I shouldn't have to keep my promise if they don't keep their part of it. But even as he thought it, Zach knew he couldn't kid himself with such a weak excuse. He'd waited long enough, maybe too long. He had no idea how he could get himself all the way to New York in 5 days, but that's what he had to do. Today was Saturday. He'd just have to miss a few more days of school. He knew Khalida would be angry and his dad would probably tan his hide for it, but there was too much at stake to let that stop him. What was it that Ray Kit had told him? When you don't know what to do, take one step at a time, one action, and then look from there to see what the next step could be. Zach had no idea what he'd do once he got to New York and found the United Nations building, but he'd just have to count on Ray Kit's advice. Somehow he would get himself to the steps of the UN and then look forward from there. Come on, Angus, we're going on a trip. After breakfast, Zach helped Khalida clean the dishes for a few minutes, then excused himself. What do you have planned today? Khalida asked as he started for the front door, Angus close at his heels. Just fooling around, Zach replied, his usual when he didn't know or didn't want Khalida to know what his plans were. Well, try not to wear holes in your new pants, and... The screen door slammed shut. Zach sat on the porch steps. Angus sat down beside him. What would Luke do in a situation like this? Zach asked as he scratched behind Angus's ear. How would he get to New York? He'd drive, Zach thought. Well, if Luke lost his license, then he'd get one of his friends to drive. Great. I don't have any friends old enough to drive. What else would Luke do? As Zach continued to ponder the question, a city bus passed by on the street and stopped at the corner. The door opened, and Old Man Brown hobbled down the steps. Zach stared absent-mindedly at the scene before him, wondering where his neighbor had been so early in the morning. It suddenly struck him what he was looking at. A bus. Of course, that's how Luke would get himself to New York. Well, the truth was, Luke probably wouldn't use a bus, but Zach sure could. They weren't as fast as flying, but at least they might be within his budget. One thing Zach prided him on was his ability to allowance and the money he earned doing various odd jobs for times when he really needed it. Well, this was one of those times, if ever there was one. The entire animal kingdom depended on his getting to New York, not to mention a few billion human beings as well. Zach ran to his bedroom and reached up on his chest of drawers for his piggy bank. Then he climbed under his bed and pulled out a cigar box wrapped with rubber bands. Better go to the shed out back and count the money, he thought. Khalida had a tendency to show up in his bedroom at the wrong times, and if she saw him counting his money, the questions would start flying. Behind the shed, Zach pulled the plastic plug from the piggy bank's stomach, glad his dad had bought him a bank that didn't need to be broken to get into. He dumped the pile of coins and bills out on the ground, then pulled the rubber bands out from around the cigar box. He hesitated for a moment before dumping the contents of the box on the ground with the other money. He'd always kept his allowance money separate from the money he earned in his business. His dad taught him to keep personal separate from business, one of Zach's first lessons about finance. Now he knew he'd need all the money, and business and personal didn't seem to make much difference. He dumped all the money together and began counting it. After several minutes, he sat back, a pleased look on his face. $147.37. He never would have guessed he'd saved so much. Maybe this keeping two different stashes of money hidden away really worked. Surely he had enough money to get the two of them to New York City. But what would he do once he got there? The question begged for an answer. His dad's job forced the Bates family to travel a lot over the last several years, but never to New York. Still, Zach knew New York was one of the biggest cities in the world, and he'd heard his dad complain about how difficult and expensive it would be to live in New York. Suddenly, the pile of money sitting in front of him didn't look so large. Next to him, Angus whined and pawed at Zach's leg. Zach reached out and scratched behind his friend's ear. Angus rewarded him with a couple of dog. "You're right, Angus. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Zach began placing the money in the cigar box. "Let's go pack." Zach pushed the swinging glass door open to the Greensboro bus terminal. Before entering, he turned to Angus. "You stay out here and keep watch. I'll get the tickets." Angus whined once, then lay down next to the door to wait. Zach adjusted the straps along his pack, thinking he might have overpacked it. The straps were already wearing the skin on his shoulders raw. It'll get light soon enough, he thought. At least half of the pack was stuffed with the food he'd borrowed from Kalida's pantry. He'd had no idea what he would actually need for such a trip, but food was one thing you could always use. Zach stood inside the terminal and looked around, waiting for his eyes to adjust to the dim light. Musty smelling, he thought, as he spied the ticket counter on the far side of the room. It smells like someone who needs to take a shower. He walked over to the ticket counter, trying his best to match Luke's familiar saunter. What if they refuse to sell me a ticket? Or what if I don't have enough money? What if they ask to see my parents? And what if... "Can I help you?" the lady behind the ticket counter asked, shaking Zach out of his thoughts. "Yes'm. What time is the next bus to New York City?" The lady glanced down at a clipboard sitting on the desk in front of her. "The next one leaves at 4:45 this afternoon, scheduled to arrive in New York at 5:40 tomorrow morning. I'd like a ticket." Zach held his breath. Please let me have enough, he thought. "One way or two?" One way. I'm meeting my folks there." "That'll be $105, the lady said without batting an eye. I've got enough, Zach thought as he counted out the money. Oops, don't forget about Angus. And I needed a ticket for my dog also. "No dogs allowed on the bus. Company rule," the lady replied just as quickly. Zach gulped. Angus had to go with him. There was no way he could leave his one true friend behind. What am I going to do? He laid the money on the counter and watched as the lady counted it, then slid the ticket to him. He picked up the ticket and started walking back to the door leading outside where Angus waited. Now is not the time to buckle under. So the bus had rules. Everyone had rules. It didn't mean you always had to follow them, not when the entire animal kingdom was at stake. Angus had to come with him. That's all there was to it. That's my rule, Zach thought as he pushed the door open. The only question was how. Zach walked over to a wooden bench to wait for the bus to arrive and pulled his knapsack off to give his shoulders a rest. As he set the pack down on the bench, it suddenly dawned on him how to get Angus on the bus. The bus driver stood at the door of the bus collecting tickets. As Zach waited in the short line, he studied the driver. He was older than Zach's father, but not as old as Old Man Brown. Maybe he can't see or hear too well, Zach thought, and then realized it was doubtful the man would be driving a bus if that were the case. He started to adjust the straps, then thought better of it. One of Angus's favorite tricks was playing dead, but it had never been more important for him to follow Zach's command. Any movement or noise would cost them dearly. "Ticket, please." The bus driver smiled down at Zach, who reached out and gave him his ticket. "Running away from home?" the driver asked, glancing around but still smiling. "No, sir. My brother had to go to the bathroom. He's seeing me off, and my folks will be waiting for me at the other end." Zach had rehearsed the line a dozen times and was thankful he had. Even with the rehearsal, the words tried to cling to his throat. "Stay, play dead," Zach thought as hard as he could. "Please don't move, Angus." "Well, get on board so we can get you home to your parents," the driver said as he handed the ticket stub back to Zach. He glanced at his watch. Sure, Zach answered, still too scared to breathe. He climbed the stairs and was almost at the top when he heard the driver say, "Son, about that knapsack." Zach froze. What had happened? Had Angus moved? He hadn't felt anything. Had the top parted, allowing the driver to see inside? Without moving, Zach turned and looked at the driver. "Yes?" he said in a voice so soft he wondered if he'd actually said anything. "You would put it underneath." Zach was the driver then turned to take a ticket from the elderly Zach.
You're freezing again, Ben.
The best he could do was the last. I'm almost done.
No.
Let's see. The best he could do was the last seat on the left. It was narrower than the others to make room for the restroom. Zach sat down near the outside and gently removed the knapsack, setting it down beside him. He loosened one of the straps and peeled one corner of the top away. Angus's nose immediately appeared in the opening. Zach bent moist black nose. "Good boy, Angus, good boy. Now you've got to be quiet and stay inside until we get started. We're not in New York yet."
Okay. We made it. Tech issues and everything. Thanks for your patience and persistence there. I want to just finish up with a few quick announcements. Again, I'm going to share my screen. Go over here to this. Okay. One of the things I want to first make sure you are all aware of, we are very excited about this. We have coming in February. Is it February?
No,
Wait a minute.
the 19th.
Of February or
No,
January?
19th of January.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, when I was looking, I was like, no, it's not that far away. So we'll get that corrected. So let's make note of that coming on January the 19th, our first guest author read-up will be with Janelle Leanne Schmidt, who is on the line. I believe she's still here. I'm not able to see her at the moment, but
I am here. Sorry,
okay.
I'm having to use my old computer tonight because my new one got water spilled on it, and my old computer just suddenly decided that I don't have a camera, which is silly because I do.
So it must be the technological, snafus out there, the gremlins out there tonight. Well, she is here. You can see her lovely picture here. We will be doing our first guest author, where we'll be having a kind of an informal chit chat with her, interview to find out more about her books, herself, what it is to be a author of children and young adult fiction. And Ben will be reading from her first book in the minstrel song, King's Warrior. I'm in the process of listening to it. This is one of the books that Ben has, narrated the entire book for as well. So we'll be reading a portion of that, and we'll be also giving time for your families, your friends, your kids and adults to come and ask questions, make comments about the book. If you have the opportunity to read it, ahead of time, or if you are a fan of Janelle's already, we would encourage you to come and be a part of that. And again, we really do request your assistance. We're reaching out in all the many different ways we can to reach as many kids as possible, kids and their parents. We want to inspire young people to become joyful, lifelong readers, where reading for pleasure is one of the things they most enjoy doing. So, and we need your help. So keep, sharing and passing that along to other people as well. Also, our next to the last Dominion Overall Read-Up will be in February the 2nd from 7 to 8. And that registration is now open. Again, if you're on this call, you I think everybody on the call tonight
Um,
has already registered. Yes, you have a question?
well, actually, I drew a compass thing. I don't know if you guys can see it that good. It's a Zach Bates compass thing.
Very good. Let me get off of let's see if I can get off. No, I don't think I can.
And each
sharing my
of the things is like a paw print.
Ah,
I was originally just making something.
very cool. Very cool.
Oh, what a great design.
Yeah. Maybe you can take have your dad take a picture of that and send that to me. We can that way I'll be able to see it a little bit more clearly. Let's see, what else do we have to share here? One last thing. Again, we are continuing our contest or our giveaway or game. You can join the Zach Bates Eco Adventure team. And when you do, receive a free ebook and a audiobook of Dominion Over All, which is the one that we've been reading. And this is something that you can have forever and listen to as many times as you like. We are about 2/3 of the way to our game of giving away at least 1,000 of these books. So we'll continue that for a few more weeks. And I think there's one other thing. Yes, as I mentioned, Junkyard Dogs is coming along very well. Hopefully by February we'll have at least the book version of that out, and shortly we'll have the audiobook version of that as well. Okay, I think that's it for the announcements. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. And if anybody has any questions and or comments, we'll open it up now to that. And if not, we will fold our tents and go away until January 19th for our first guest author event itself. Questions or comments?
Well, I did want to introduce you guys to my cat, but he's sleeping and him. But he's been listening this whole time.
Well, good. I hope he or she is a fan of Rakits, and I know I would not dare try to wake up Mama Kitty in her days without ending up with claw marks on my hand probably if I did that. So cats have a way of doing that. Okay.
Thank you. It was wonderful being with each one of you. And Ben, in spite of all the difficulties, I got the gist of this.
Okay.
It's very exciting. So thank you.
Very good. Okay. So until January 19th, thank you for coming, and we will talk with you all very soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.